Hello, this is Kelly Kleinman, and you are listening to the DealershipNews.com podcast, where we spotlight the who's happening in the automotive industry. It's foot soldiers, visionaries, salesmen, GMs, owners, service managers, and industry vendors alike. Today, we're happy to have with us a fixed ops specialist, a guy who has more years in the automotive business than he may care to admit, but nonetheless, he's one of the good guys, John Fairchild of Fairchild Automotive Solutions. John, thanks for your time. I got everything great. I almost screwed up your name. John Fairchild.
Thank you. Glad to be here talking with you guys and kind of chatting about the industry. There's a lot going on these days.
Happy to have you on board. Taking a look at your bio and all. At 15 years old, most teenage boys are concerned with either sports or girls, maybe the first inklings of rock and roll lifestyle, perhaps all the above, but there were always those few gearheads, as we used to call them back in the day in Cleveland, Ohio, guys who just loved their cars. Was that you, John?
Well, actually, it wasn't. I grew up in Southern California in the 70s, and my brother was an extreme gearhead. Back then, the old Volkswagen Bugs from the 60s were the hot thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he had them torn apart in every piece imaginable in our small yard and carport that we had. But no, I just kind of lucked into it. And, I work on cars because I had to, and I have to work on the one that I had. But I really got into it as a means to an end. I needed a job, and a buddy of mine was working at the local Ford store, and he got a better job actually to go with a over the road trucker for the summer, and he referred me, and I got a job there at the local Ford store as the cleanup boy, and they actually called me boy. Hey boy, get over here and clean this up. And for $5 an hour under the table, and that's kind of how I got started in it, was just making some money.
Well, you had to have had an inspiration, and I don't know if it was your brother or somebody at the Ford lot, but who was your mentor in automotive?
I've been very thankful to have a few in the various phases of my career, and obviously the first interest really was my brother. My father and mother got divorced early, so I wasn't really with my father. And he wasn't really a gearhead or an automotive guy anyway, but my brother was. And then it was funny, as fate has it, I was dating a girl in Southern California there that we went to school, and her father had married, divorced, and moved back to his home state of Georgia, and was actually a service manager at the Toyota store. And when we left California, we moved to Georgia. He actually hired me as a parts flunky for $4 an hour, and to a great degree, he was a great mentor to me. He's passed away since, but always remained a very close friend and confidant. And I rocked on with my career, and I eventually became a fixed ops director. And when that happened, it was at a Ford dealership, and they at the time had a program where they sent you a mentor to select stores. So we must have sucked bad enough that they sent us a guy, and I can't tell you how much I learned from him. His name is Mike Poole, and he's retired now. Mm-hmm. But he worked for a company called MSX International, which is a pretty good sized vendor for automotive to this day. And he taught me a really lot about working smarter, not harder, and actually, accomplishing things. And when I left that position, he contacted me and actually hired me as a consultant for MSX, and I spent 6 years with them. But Mike Poole was my mentor during that phase of my career, and now I've actually still got mentors that I work with that are other consultants, trainers, coaches, and speakers. So I think that is an important part of your career path is having mentoring.
I just want to know who mentored you to go from $5 to $4 when you moved to
Well, the cost of living of once I made it out of Southern California and saw how beautiful Georgia was, and sure. I just had to be there. So I was willing to take a little bit of a hit to to get to where I wanted to go. But it was probably comparable to what you'd spend in California versus the cost of living in Georgia. But
Sure. I'm teasing. Georgia's beautiful. I love
yeah.
the red clay, and we used to drive through
Oh
Georgia
yeah.
on the way to Florida, and I always wanted to, why don't we just stay here for a couple of days? I loved it. So why don't you tell us about the methodology that you call S3 service sales strategies and why it's so effective?
Well, I appreciate that question. That was right down my alleyway. Actually, I've over the years, and I've been consulting on my own with my own company for 10 years now, and this has been developed through all of my years. But basically, it's a protocol to engage a dealership management system that works to maximize your current traffic. So, and there's basically two ways to do that. One is through the pricing of what we're selling to customers, and how we're capitalizing on the gross profit of that, and how your service pricing strategies are aligned, both that they're popular in the marketplace and also profitable.
Mm-hmm.
And the second part of that, which really I'm passionate about, is just how do we quote unquote sell to a service customer. And I use the quotations because I really don't feel like it's a sales process per se, as much as it is just really good, straightforward advising and doing it in the right way. So I train to a method that is really a prioritized presentation, where you don't have to be afraid that you're going to blow the customer out of the water, or offering them something that they're not going to be receptive to, because the way that you're presenting it is giving options. So if I present you things that you need, and my only option, Kelly, is all or nothing, then you're very liable to take the nothing option. Right. And whereas if I can help a customer by advising them of what should be done next, and let's face it, in the service department, statistically at least, most people are going to say no at any given time. Okay, if you're in the 35% penetration rate, you're a rock star. So that means 65 or 70 people out of 100 are telling you no of some way or another, some form of no. So it really is critical that we are communicating with the customers in a consistent way and in a prioritized way, and just to keep them aware of what their options are, and they will come around and buy from you. Customers love to buy, but they really hate for you to sell them. Isn't that true?
Oh yeah, absolutely true. 100% true.
So that's really what S3 encompasses, is maximizing current traffic through sales process, quote unquote, and through pricing strategies to align them in your market for the best profitability, and also best customer satisfaction through fair and competitive pricing.
Well, one of my big issues was I still have a service engine, check engine light, I should say, that keeps popping up on my Tiguan. Yeah. It's 2013. It goes away in the cold weather and it comes back, periodically. And just to get the code reading on that, my dealership wanted to charge me $100 just to drive in, or the Volkswagen dealership in my area, and my local independent mechanic said, just come on by, I'll just check it out for nothing. So there's also those issues, certainly here in Southern California, and living where I do. Doesn't mean that my income necessarily matches my zip code, but nonetheless, they do try to take you to the cleaners, and that I think is a big issue, is that they don't trust the dealership. Some feel they have to go to the dealership to get the right part, but some don't trust it, and it's not selling them.
Yeah.
I mean, everything that you said makes sense. You don't want to sell, you want to share information with,
guide,
more than anything.
Yeah, thank you. Sharing information. That's exactly what you're doing. You're sharing information. And I get what you're saying. There is a lot of there's a lot of talk out there, I think, in certain circles that speaks to the fact that you may be able to get a lower price at an independent shop. And I think there's a couple things working there, honestly, with a dealership. And number one is absolutely, there's two types of labor that we are in parts. that we're selling in a dealership service department. One type of parts and labor is menu driven. So it's going to be something that you can get done at a competitive mom and pop shop or a competitive non-franchise chain like your Pet Boys or what have you. Okay, so that type of business that we're selling to customers has got to be competitive. Okay, we don't want to be the lowest, right? But we don't certainly want to be the highest. I think that the population, if they go to a dealer, they're going to expect a little more expense, but receive hopefully some perceived at least value in why they're creating that expense, in that you have factory trained technicians and equipment and overhead. So that's the one part of your labor is competitive. The other part is proprietary. So that proprietary part of the labor is the stuff that, for example, you talked about Volkswagen, that would be related to that manufacturer. And so it'd be a repair work that would be almost warranty-like, but not, but customer pay repairs like your check engine light and stuff. So a dealer's got to be competitive. And I urge dealers to do at least a quarterly competitive market survey and put those competitive results, adjust your pricing, and then put those competitive results in a place that people can feel that they have some transparency about your pricing, competitive leaderboards and whatnot in your service department. The second issue I really see with that whole question, honestly, Kelly, is that in reality, in a dealership, there is a lifespan of a serviceable vehicle. And so what happens is after a vehicle gets a certain, and I don't know if yours you said it was a 13, so it's probably not got this many miles, but once you get past 150,000 or plus, depending on the make or whatever, it almost can become a liability to work on that type of vehicle in a dealership, so that the pricing will really only bring you the ones that are truly willing to pay that for your services. Because what can happen is if you don't have some kind of high mileage waiver that you're getting your customer to sign, and a lot of times even if you do, is that if you're fixing systems that are on a vehicle that's long in the tooth, it's going to create a weakness in a sister system that may have showed any trouble to begin with, and it's a very slippery slope. So the dealers are really honestly trying to balance that type of business they're coming in. Of course they want retention. Of course they want as many vehicles they can service, but the serviceable life of a vehicle really past a certain degree is going to be better handled by the aftermarket.
That's interesting. I did not know that. It's a little scary.
Yeah, and if you can imagine what a policy account is in a service department, that's where they say, I'm just going to go ahead and cover Kelly's check engine light because he's raising a fuss about it. We'll pay for that one. Or this car we fixed, and now this other part's gone wrong. The customer's raising Cain. They put a bad review on Google. They're actually going to get a survey from the manufacturer. We got to do something to make this right. Go ahead and make that $1,200 repair for them, and just get them out of here. And so they end up spending so much money and turning the wheels. It's kind of like, it can become like the 80-20 rule, where you're spending 80% of your time dealing with the 20% of the people that you're not making any money on. So you got to be really, really careful in that environment. And that, I don't think that's something that's really talked about a lot, because it's kind of a turnoff to say it in those regards. But every savvy service manager knows that.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes all the sense in the world. So let's just slightly switch gears a little bit. You do quite a bit of training. You do seminars and on-site training. Hence, you've come across an abundance of automotive personnel over the years. Do you see any differences between personnel of yesteryear, say 20, 25, 30 years ago, with today's collective? What's the difference between the average automotive professional between now and then?
Well, primarily, and I hate to say this because it sounds so cliche, but primarily it's lack of work ethic, and maybe perhaps a instant gratification kind of mindset that what I try to push with the dealers that I work with is really to create a career path within your dealership to where when you hire somebody, especially on an entry level, that they see that this, according to how they want to play it, can be more than just a job. Because what can happen is, you get somebody in a position where they don't really have that side. If you're not hiring that you could see that person in the next position, then it is going to become a dead end. But what happens, I also feel like every generation kind of says this about the last generation, because it almost feels like people were saying that about me when I was young, But I do think there is some truth to that of late. And also I think that most dealerships don't have a good mentoring or career path in place that can really attract people who have a work ethic and want to progress up the ladder. The car dealership is an amazing business in that you can start at a very, very entry level, even right now today, and eventually own your own dealership or whatever, however far you want to take it.
I'm on board. I want to have a Rolls-Royce dealership. No, I don't. I probably want to sell nothing but Toyotas. Toyotas and F-150s. That's all I want to sell.
Yeah, no, that's good. Those are good things, that's for sure.
So, in your opinion, we've pretty much already talked about the issue with overpricing in dealership service departments and certain retention strategies, because obviously transparency is important and being able to communicate. But let's talk about what sells a customer. Is it transparency? Is it emotional buttons? Is it price? Is it trust?
Okay. I'll tell you exactly what it is, Kelly. And the ones that can play this, they got to have all those things you mentioned. But the number one thing they have to have above that is a relationship with that person on a personal level. People have to like you. Yeah. And if you haven't established that, then you're going to have a really tough road to hoe, and you're going to have to use all your tricks to really progress that relationship. And the way it's different from car sales, as I see it, is that you get more than one chance to sell that customer. And as I was saying earlier, they're not going to buy on the first time you ask them statistically. But if you don't ask them in a consistent way over time, then they're definitely not going to buy. So I really boil it down to three things: is the timing of how you're making offerings to customers. So if they've been sitting in your waiting room too long, they're ready to go. Mm-hmm. Okay. The consistency of the way you're making offers. So if you come in today and I say, hey man, you need a transmission service, and you say, nah, I'm going to wait. The next time you come in, I don't mention that, or I mention something completely different, then I've lost your credibility and I've lost that consistency. And number three, really, that makes a difference to me is the quality. And the way that I would address the quality is that your vehicle, anybody's vehicle, my wife's vehicle, my daughter is driving now, so she's got a vehicle, which is scary as crap. But
I hear you.
The thing about that I would want, Kelly, that my daughter takes her vehicle in, is that they would go through that thing and tell me everything she needs and why she needs it and when she needs it, or me. So that does relate to your transparency aspect of it, and that's truly what I believe really makes the difference. If we can give them a quality report in a prioritized way, consistently, and with the right timing, then you got a winning solution.
We're down to the final question, basically. So the question is, and you already know what it is.
Kelly.
I pre-fed you these things. But let's say you have a crystal ball. I like asking this to everybody. I ask some really standard questions because, it's really important to check everyone's pulse, because that's sort of what we do over here. We get intel because we are the an intellectual resource for car dealers. So in the John Fairchild crystal ball, what are car sales going to look like in your neck of the woods, and how strong are used car sales going to be versus those new car sales from a ratio standpoint?
That's a good question. In my personal opinion is that new car is going to dip a little bit and cause used car to rise. But the overall output of this year is probably going to be level or a little bit less than last year. Mm-hmm. Having said that, my focus is really primarily fixed operations, but I do see that lending well to the service drive, because in either case, people got to get their cars fixed, man.
Yeah, that is true, right? Hey, listen, John, we all want to thank you for joining us. That was Mr. John Fairchild, Fairchild Automotive Solutions, and he's got a lot to say, and it all makes a lot of good sense. I highly recommend you hire the guy. He's good stuff. I'm Kelly Kleiman. This is Dealership News' Quickcast. Have a great day.